Everybody, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Today is Monday, January 29th, 4 p.m. special meeting, Parish Police Jury. Discussion only. Hospital. Who are we gonna, who's gonna represent you? Who's gonna do the talking?
I'll provide as much information. If there's something I don't know, we've got some board members here that can interject. It depends on what the questions are, but I'll have there's some board members here that can answer some questions if I don't have the answers. I'm not sure what all the questions may be, but I'll do my best, and that's why I'm got all these documents here to try to answer some of those questions. But there's board members here to answer anything. I'll start.
That being said, from the service district in Mr. Sadi in Mr. Marks area, we'll open the floor. Whichever one of y'all want to get started.
Yes, yeah, let's do the pledge and call it to order, and we can get the options, okay?
Or we have
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
all right. Sorry. So, Mr. Marks, you want to get started?
Yes, and certainly, it's in my district and also Mr. McGee's district, and I think we both respect each other and working together and hope to work together with everybody, with the hospital and everything. We're not here to hinder nobody or do nothing, we're just here to make the right choice. We want facts. However, I would personally like us to have this discussion with the board for the simple purpose, we're not in court, we just asking, facts, just like they would ask, and talk about at their meetings. And it's not only for our purposes for information, but the public's also. So we just trying to be transparent with everybody. And I turn it to Mr. Sonny and see if he has any suggestions on that.
I've been trying to keep up with this. This is new to me, but I'm learning as fast as I can. One thing that I want to say is that we are representatives of the people, and in the end, it's going to be what the people want. We work for you. It's not the other way around. So if the people want it, we're going to work to get it. If people don't want it, then we'll come up with plan B.
Well, and Mr. Dago, that's a good idea to hear the board members. Some of them have been on the board longer than others. I think somebody asked that we bring some minutes. Do we have like a? Oh, there you go.
I have all the minutes
So-
for 2023
So Ms. Trahan was hired as the secretary
in January.
treasurer, or just put it in? So going forward, I'm pretty comfortable with what the minutes reflect and that they're up to date and accurate. Before that, we're missing minutes. We have some audio recordings. In fact, tomorrow night's meeting we have on the agenda for the hospital, has a meeting tomorrow night, is to hire Roxanne Bodwin, who's the court reporter, to take those transcripts and transcribe, take the audio and transcribe that, so we'll have minutes from meetings in the past that we don't have technical minutes. We have audio, but not the written minutes. And she can, as a certified court reporter, she can verify that this is a true and correct. So we have minutes of meetings that Julie brought, because one of y'all asked. And, let me lay some foundation to a few things that I've been asked about this issue. Again, the floor is wide open to questions, but I'll just answer a few things that I've been asked either individually and so everybody, so you all will have the answers to some of those questions. So, in some of our meetings, I always say we start with the proposition. So, South Cameron, oh, sorry, this is the health unit. Well, whether it's the health unit or the hospital, they have a proposition. Last fall, the public renewed the health unit tax. It's 1.3 mils, parish-wide tax for the health unit. It collects about $600,000 to $650,000 a year for the purpose of supporting the health center in Cameron Parish. So that's the health unit tax, parish-wide, 10 years, just renewed last year for another 10 years. The parish has not actually collected that tax for the last maybe 5 years or so, or since 2018. Just information, you just hadn't needed it. I guess, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So they haven't actually collected it. And we're talking about the health units, and we're here to talk about the hospital. Well, part of some of your questioning is the repairs to the health unit building, which the hospital is going to is leasing from the use of that from y'all for a period of 2 years to provide like urgent or some level of medical services similar to an urgent care. The hospital people may say that's not the right terminology, but that's the type of care. It'll have prescription med, you get your prescriptions, and you can have some level of, you can get shots, draw blood, you know, your typical urgent care type stuff or general practitioner type stuff will be provided through that building. Historically, when the hospital was in existence, the building was in existence before Hurricane Laura, there was a level of services that included the equivalent of an urgent care type clinic and prescription meds that the local people, or anybody could go to and get those services. So anyway, that's why I'm talking about the health unit, because of the police jury and the hospital board's agreement to let the hospital use that health unit for a period of time to provide these limited services. The idea is if and when a hospital is built, then those services will be transferred to the campus in Creole where they were before Hurricane Laura. So this is just a temporary relief or temporary use of y'all's building. But
Mr. Perry, question. You stated that it was a lease. Is there a value to that lease?
no, so, and the lease is not, I should have said the use of. So the prior police jury and the board, we have a written cooperative endeavor agreement that I didn't remember we have, but it basically says, the police jury said in exchange for providing, thank you, in exchange for providing a service to the people of South Cameron, being these limited medical services, we recognize that's a benefit to our community, so we'll allow you the use of this public building. It's one public entity helping another public entity for the benefit of the public and the people, and that's allowed. So there was no money to be exchanged in the use of the building, like a lease. So I say it's really the use of the building, not a lease where there's a payment, which is not uncommon, but words matter, and it's not a lease. It's an agreement to allow the use for a period, I think, 2 years, and the term is in the cooperative endeavor agreement. So that's what brings the hospital to the health unit. It's a temporary deal so they can provide some limited services. I was just giving you some history on the health unit. The health unit in 2017, 18, and 19, those are the 3 years before the hurricane. I'd ask Kayla and if you don't have it, Kayla can send you these spreadsheets. But it's just what does the police jury spend on the health unit each year? Just again, giving you information about what's the health unit, what's it cost. So if you do impose the full the 1.3 mills that you're entitled to impose, parish-wide, you collect about $600 to $650 a year if you impose the full amount. Just by way of example, in 2017, it was I'm rounding it off, $130,000 in expenses that year. 2018, it was $380, but there was a $190,000 FEMA project worksheet refund, along with a $33,000 debt service loan payment. So, but if you back out those two unusual, exceptional numbers, it was $156,000. So, 130, 156,000. In 2019, it was 134. So it gives you an idea, $130,000 to $140,000 a year of operating expenses for the health unit. You have the ability to collect 3 or 4 times that much in your proposition for the health unit. That's health unit. You currently have, the police jury let out bids for the repairs to the health unit. It's about 1.1, a little over $1 million for the repairs, I think is the low. That would be on your agenda next month to accept the lowest bidder. Round numbers, it's a little over $1 million. And Katie, I think it's fair to say you have funds in your account, excuse me, between flood and wind insurance proceeds, PW worksheet, obligation, mitigation. You have 1.3, is that about right? You have $1.3 million in funds available. So you have funds available in the health unit, I don't know, I call it the insurance FEMA account dollars. That's not your ad valorem tax dollars, which you have about a $240,000 balance, I think is.
Quick question on the FEMA stuff while we're right here.
Yeah.
And the PW. This money for FEMA, that, if it's from my best understanding, is that for to return the building back like it was prior?
Correct.
Yes.
In any of all this with the bids, do we know whether they're adding to it a price amount versus
Yes, sir.
basically a price amount between what the PW will cover and what the health, the hospital is adding to it? Do we know the estimated cost, the
Yes.
difference of that?
Yes, sir. We, so one element that's an increased cost is there's a there was an alternative one to the bid, and it was to expedite the repairs, get it done in a hurry. And the low bidder, it was $10,000. So, the hospital said, we've asked for that, because we won't mean, everybody would like it repaired sooner than later, but the hospital, in order to get these medical services as quickly as possible available to the public, we asked that that be made an alternate. So that $10,000 is an extra that the hospital, I think the hospital's agreed to pay.
And
Yeah.
the architect's here if you.
Yeah,
have
an
some
architect.
specific
So
questions.
and so the meeting tomorrow night on the agenda, it's $10,000 for the expedited repairs. And there's a few other things that the hospital added, and the hospital's paying for those extras. And it's delineated and outlined by the architect, and
This is 21,000.
This
Oh.
is the agenda.
It's on our line.
so for tomorrow night's agenda, $10,000 for the expedited costs. The hospital asked that a 50 amp exterior breaker be included, a lead line wall for the x-ray room, some cost, it's so another $21,000. So it's $10,000 for the expedited repairs and $21,000 in changes that the hospital asked. So it's a total of $31,000
It's
in
21,
extras.
Tom, it's 21 total.
Total 20, oh,
Yeah.
so it's 11 for the material changes, 10 for the expedited, so a total of 21,000 that they're gonna vote on to approve for that extra cost to you all, and FEMA does not pay for that. They don't pay for extras.
Yes.
They gotta go back to exactly, and Katie sent me an email, I don't know if you guys got it, but basically, we have a PW, and if you change the flooring, and you upgrade the flooring, well, you gotta pay for the upgrade. And that's how technical and particular they are. But anyway, it's $21,000 worth of increased cost as a result of what the hospital has requested to be done to that building, and they're voting, and I expect that they'll agree. to
And
pay.
also another FEMA question, real quick, while we on the FEMA topic. From my understanding, I spoke with Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh. I think she stressed to me a little bit about, they're working in our West Annex building. It's kinda, I think, a problem. Maybe they'd like to see themselves in there pretty quick, but also, she would like to see if her staff would be in a building, she would much rather see it elevated. That way, if another storm does come and occur, that it won't take as long to get back in the building to produce the services. With that being said, if we go forward with this, what's the PW on the elevation grant? And if we do this, are we gonna be able to elevate this building down the road?
So the elevation grant has been applied for. It's through FEMA, but they classify it as like a hazard mitigation grant. HMGP is the acronym they use. And it was submitted a year and a half ago. It's pending approval. FEMA says they're processing it. So far, they have not requested any more additional information. They call it an RFI. Our grant consultants haven't received anything from them since July of 2022. I did put in a request for an update with FEMA. They have a changeover of leadership at GOSEP as well. But right now, that's all I can tell you is it's in FEMA's hands and it hasn't been approved. I don't know if it will be approved. We have every reason to believe it will be, but ultimately, until you have something in writing from FEMA, you can't really guarantee that we'll receive the grant. But it was submitted for about a $900,000. Your cost share is gonna be zero. This is a 100% disaster funded hazard mitigation grant, so it's not gonna cost the police jury anything to elevate it. And typical timelines of elevation is, within 30 days. They're able to do it pretty quickly. So yes, it can be, if we get the grant, it can be elevated. It's about a 30-day turnaround from when they start to finish. The only thing is, if they're in the middle of construction, I don't really know what that looks like. Maybe Tom can advise us. If we're under construction and we get the elevation grant, technically the building is in the contractor's hand. It's their building. They're insured. So when they elevate it, if any damages occur, it would ultimately be our fault. And I don't know if the contractor would accept liability or do any type of agreement with us if we damaged it. So they may say, no, you're not gonna elevate it, we're in the middle of fixing it. When you take the building back over, then you can go elevate it. And then if anything happens, walls crack, paint cracks, whatever, we have to go back in and fix that.
I would suspect that would be the way so you let out the bid for the repairs. Whoever the contractor who would repair the health unit, they would not want another contractor elevating at the same time. They just wouldn't be very practical. I know from personal experience, I've seen several homes get elevated, and it's amazing. They say leave the pictures on the wall, and there's going to be some cracks and whatnot, but it's amazing what they do. That's just my experience.
Yes, no, they do an excellent job. I watched two of them in the Creo area. They picked up some really big houses slapping on. But just to touch base a little more, because I talked with you a little bit about it. So we are for certain, if we go down this road, that FEMA will approve it, or is there a gray area they might not approve it because we fixed it beforehand?
No, so fixing it before that's not gonna jeopardize the elevation grant. The ultimate thing is, what FEMA looks at, they have a formula. They do something called a BCA, a benefit cost analysis. And they go and they look at how many times they had to give us federal money to fix something versus how much it would cost us just to elevate it, and then they would never have to give us money again. And so if it scores high enough, you get the grant. We've applied before, it didn't score high enough back after Rita and this time, we think we have a better chance of getting it approved because it's flooded yet again, and we're looking at a $900,000 FEMA PW. So that's gonna help us get over that one score that we would need to qualify. But again, it's FEMA and it's subject to their administration, and we don't know until they finish processing it. But fixing it before does not jeopardize the grant, I think is what your question was.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let me, so I think based on the emails and the spreadsheet, it says there's a FEMA obligation of $910,000 for the repairs.
Yes.
But if we have, we're $670,000 in insurance, they're gonna deduct that from the?
No, so 900 is after the insurance deduction. The total
so-
FEMA PW is like 1.7 million. They assess the insurance deduct of 700,000, so that's why you're left with $1 million PW allocation, and you have to fund 90%. You have to fund 10%. They fund 90, you fund 10. So the 900,000 is the best you could expect to get reimbursed from FEMA. Now, of course, if it costs more, it's a sliding scale. You'll be eligible for more. But if for some reason you fix it for less money, then it's gonna reduce the amount that you're gonna get reimbursed for. But you're only getting reimbursed for what you spend. There is no blank check, put it in your account and go fix it, and then you get to keep the rest of it. You know, as you pay, they reimburse you. And if you leave money on the table, it goes back into the pot, the FEMA's pot for someone else. You don't just get to keep it as long as
So, so we're talking, as we're talking, please ask questions, and I'm gonna just keep feeding y'all information. So one of the questions was about the bids. So the police jury let out bids. We opened up bids to repair the health unit a week or so ago, and there's a low bidder, and it's coming up for y'all's consideration at your next meeting. So the question to me was, do we have to accept the bids or the lowest bidder? Well, generally speaking, you have to accept the lowest bid. On construction project, the only factor is the lowest bidder. This isn't a service contract. It's not a request for proposal where you can have a grading system. The lowest bidder wins, whether you like the contractor or not. If their bid checks off all the boxes, it's a legal bid, then the lowest bidder gets it, period. There's one exception to that rule in this parish. Some years ago, we had some issues with a Priola. I don't know the legal Priola construction, because there's several out there. But we had several contracts that Priola Construction was a low bidder. We had issues, we had litigation with them. We actually had a hearing with the police jury, gave notice to Priola, and we declared them a irresponsible bidder, so they're not eligible. That Priola entity, that contractor license, they're not eligible to bid on our projects anymore in this parish. So that's it. And if there were any other contractors you felt were irresponsible and we should not, then we can give them notice. We have a hearing and declare them incompetent. So it has to be you have to have some justification and basis in that. And with that, we still got a lawsuit going on with Priola over the sheriff's office. We had some issues with them. So there was a lot to it. We put all that on at a public meeting, and the jury and they didn't. And Priola didn't contest it. But that's an exception to the rule. We had a hearing. We disqualified them. But generally speaking, you got to take the lowest bidder, unless the statute says, and for everybody wanting to know, it's 38:2214. So the legislature has these revised statutes. They're in volumes of 1, 12, 14, so forth. And with respect to this, it's 38. So it's volume 38, statute 2214. So 38:2214 talks about public bids, and it says that basically you can reject any and all bids for just cause. So if you have just cause, and that's it, it's in the statute, you can reject a bid. And it gives some for instance, and we have in the past, the police jury has rejected bids when the architect and the engineer will have plans. They have a budgeted, we expect it's going to cost $1 million to make repairs or build this building. So you have a budget going in, and so you advertise, you expect that it's gonna be something in that range. Well, if it comes back, there's no formula, but let's just say it comes back at the lowest bidder's 2 million. And the jury's like, well, wait a minute, what the heck? We thought it was gonna, you can reject that as being outside your budget, of expectations, and then you go back to the drawing board and try to figure out what went wrong, why is it so high? That would be just cause. You changed your mind, that's not good. Good, that's not just cause.
It was from my understanding, with speaking with Ms. Stephanie, that the whole purpose of this bid was to weigh out the cost versus the cost of the mobile unit, to weigh out the time frame of the expedited rebuild versus the time frame on the truck. My question is, did they decide not to go with the truck and to choose this path?
They haven't yet. Is that on the agenda for tomorrow?
So if we have to have cause to turn down this bid, and everything looks legit, other than they have not made up their mind one way or another, where do we go from here, say if they choose not to take the bid?
Well, the police jury, it's police jury's building. Y'all are accepting the bid to repair it. So what happened about 6 weeks ago, timing may be off. So the hospital board, we entered into a letter of intent, hospital with Lake Charles and Borough Hospital. And that letter of intent back in, say, September, August, whatever it was, we had a plan of action. We're gonna buy a mobile unit, and we're gonna get that mobile unit in place as quickly, again, try to get medical services as quickly as possible. Because we didn't know how long it was gonna take to get the repairs done to the health unit. So the initial thought was, get a mobile unit, get it up and running, repair the health unit building, move into the health unit building, and then hospital later. Well, pursuant to FEMA, we had to get 3 bids from 3 different mobile type medical units. We get those in, the hospital board landed on one, whichever one they decided on. We engaged that company, said, hey, we landed on your unit, so they send us a contract basically to get started. Well, the contract has 8 to 12 week delivery. So I'm looking at that and I asked Stephanie, I said, look, do we know when the repairs to the health unit will be completed? Well, no, we don't. The bids are gonna be open in about a month, which was last week. I said, well, if it's gonna take the hospital 12 weeks to get a mobile unit, which puts us, say, March or 8, whatever, and your health unit building is gonna be ready in June or July, I mean, the board needs to weigh and consider, is it really worth the investment? Because it's, after FEMA contribution or payment, it's about a $250,000 investment that the board would have to make in this unit. And does it make much sense if you're only gonna use it for 2 months or how, I mean, just, they had, that's what, so they didn't pull the trigger on that mobile unit. They wanted to see what the expedited time frame for the repairs to the health unit building would be before they made that decision. And my appreciation is, given the fact that once you approve or accept the lowest bidder, I mean, by this summer, we'll have a building ready for medical services. So it doesn't make much sense to get a unit that may not, a mobile unit that might be ready in April or May and use it for 2 months for $250,000.
My understanding, I attended
So
a
that
hospital
was-
meeting quite a few months back, and I believe they already voted to proceed with the mobile unit. They have not pulled the trigger on it. At worst case scenario, 12 weeks times 7 is roughly 84 days. And according to the expedited bid on this specific contract to use the hospital is 120 days turnkey bid. So to me, it would have still been significantly faster to get service within the parish to use the mobile unit. So that's just why I'm asking why we went that way versus with the bids is what my question was. So I just wanted to just point that out.
Well,
We can be transparent.
the board, until the bids were open a week or so ago, we didn't know how long it was gonna take to repair that building.
Mhm.
And so that was the unknown. We had an idea of once if they decided to go with a mobile unit while we waited on the repairs to the health unit, they knew they're willing to wait a month to evaluate that.
Yes.
So that's what they did is, hey, let's not invest, it really was gonna be a $450,000 investment with some reimbursement for FEMA in a mobile unit. Again, we really don't know how long we're gonna need it. They did, at that point in time in December, they did not know. Today, they know that this, if they say tomorrow night, if they put on their agenda, just for instance, we wanna spend $450,000 on a mobile unit, and they get it in 3 months, so February, March, April, so May 1st, it goes into service, and in July 1st, we're in a health, the building's ready to, I would not think that would be a wise use of the public money to spend $400,000 for a mobile unit for 2 months. That's my personal opinion, but I don't vote. But that would not be my recommendation, because I think I try to help boards make decisions, try to anticipate public criticism or pitfalls, and to me, that's why I suggested they wait till the bids came in to evaluate the timing of that. But again, they'll vote tomorrow night, and they may say, hey, we think it's important enough, we want it for 2 months or 3 months.
Yes.
You know, but I don't know, that's the board's decision.
And just real quick, as far as how best use the money, in your opinion, would it be a good idea to rebuild this health unit without elevating it?
My personal opinion is you've got a really nice brick building back there that's sitting unused, and the longer it sits unrepaired, the more it's gonna cost to repair it. I mean, that's just the nature of a building. If you don't take care of it, it's gonna deteriorate. And I think it's in the public's interest that you fix it now. You're gonna fix it. It's not gonna be used as a health unit for the hospital for, in the scheme of things, very long. It's there for other purposes. I would hope that, so you asked my personal opinion.
Yes, sir.
I would expect that the grant evaluation to elevate it, you'd score higher if you now have made repairs to the building, because now we have a repaired building that's servicing the public, and therefore, in scoring that, whoever's scoring it will say, hey, we just spent $900,000 in FEMA dollars to repair this building. Let's elevate it so we don't spend another $1 million the next hurricane. Now, again, not my decision.
No.
You asked my personal opinion. If it was me spending the money, you've got the money in FEMA and insurance money, it's there to make the repairs. It actually came in under, less than the money you have available. Make the repairs. Hey, there may be some limitations with FEMA when you use FEMA money, what you can do with the building, but you can sell it later. Rent it out. Hell, maybe LNG buys it. To me, that's what I would think. Long-term would be, let's get it repaired, let's get it back into service, and if someday we just decide we don't need it, we can sell it.
Marvin, quick question. Whose place is it to provide a place for the health?
It's yours.
It's the jury's place. And so we're responsible to provide them places. I think if I'm not mistaken, the discussion was when we talked about building the building back, was it was going to cost as much or more to raise it than it was going to be repaired.
Yes.
So that kind of was a no-brainer from our point. If we get the elevation grant, we have a building elevated meeting code at really no cost to the people. Am I correct?
Correct.
So that was some of the logic that went on with that.
And just while we're on the topic, and while we're on this topic, before we move forward, I would also like, I watched a few past meetings, and from my understanding, it was discussed between the hospital board and the police jury board. What, did y'all ever decide, or maybe get with Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh to see if in the future, when this hospital would be built, if instead of spending all this money on a building that's not elevated, did y'all discuss and see if maybe she would want to, the hospital, and of course, at the end of the day, we make the decision on the health unit, but I think as a jury, we should try to do what's best for both parties involved in this incident. And from my understanding, she wants something that's elevated to when a storm comes, you could come back faster with the services that she's the head of producing. So in that case, if the health unit may or may not want to participate in a room in the hospital, which that would be elevated, and maybe the health unit could absorb some of the costs, maybe helping with the insurance or whatever it may be. Was that weighed out? Because I heard discussion in prior meetings about that.
I don't recall, I don't know, I'm not sure. I've not talked to Dr. Kavanaugh about her wants and needs or the providing the
Yes.
services. I have not. That's between the police jury and her. I don't-
No, understood, but in a meeting, you and Ms. Stephanie, and I think I
Yeah,
believe.
when we met on September 29th, and Dr. Kavanaugh was at the meeting, and that was a future discussion. It was not in the context of a hospital board meeting, not a decision of the board, but just discussion that once the hospital opens, that perhaps some or all of the services could move. You know,
Yes.
whatever, and again, that would be, you know, the fiduciary duty of public funds
Mhm.
to perhaps offer services in a combined environment. You know, at
Yes.
that point, take that expenditure, move it from the health unit once the hospital's built to the
No,
hospital.
absolutely, and I appreciate that, Ms. Stephanie, and the reason why I'm saying so is, to me, this is an informational meeting. I would really like to get Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh's perspective maybe later on. I'm sure we're gonna go through a lot of questions until then. But I just want to keep the option open versus us having a duty and what the health unit is willing to do and endure to get a facility that is gonna withstand hurricanes, to faster come back after the idea of possibly us going through this tragic event again. So I just want, basically to make sure we're gonna make the right decision and weigh out all the options is all. So thank y'all for that.
President Nunes, Dr. Kavanaugh is actually in the audience today. If you guys would like to hear directly from her, she'd be glad to just tell you, what her plans are for the future for this region, whether or not her space is adequate now, what she expects in the future. And you could hear directly from her on what her future goals are for providing health services in Cameron Parish.
Yeah, I believe we all want to hear, Dr. Kevin.
We
There's
have,
a mic, or you can come sit right
You wanna
here.
come up to the mic?
Whatever works. If you're more comfortable sitting.
Join fun.
Hey everybody, just a quick introduction. I'm Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh. I'm a family doc by trade, and I run the public health services in the 5-parish region, which includes Cameron here. After hurricanes Rita and Ike, there were prolonged closures of the health unit because the building, sustained a lot of damages. And then now here we are, 3 years out, almost from Hurricane Laura, and we're still operating public health services in the region, but they're in a very small space here down the hall in this building. We basically have one room. We are working on some partnerships with other entities across the parish right now, including West Cal Hospital over in Sulphur, who has clinics operational in Johnson Bayou, and Hackberry. So we are working to partner with them to open kind of small footprint, maybe one room clinic spaces that we can bring services to where those people are. We're also really interested in bringing our services out into the community. So we just did a big partnership with the Head Start in Grand Lake, and our staff from here are traveling up there and actually enrolling people in WIC and providing services, health unit services to people in the Head Start facility. So that was a really exciting partnership for us. So that's kind of one of our goals is to try to meet people where they are, because people who need public health services often face barriers like transportation, etc. So that all being said, the health unit here, this is the parish seat, and I know that we want to maintain services here, but one of the conversations that I've had with Katie for a long time now is that the space is really, in all honesty, bigger square footage than what we need to operate the services that we're operating here in Cameron. Like, we have extra space. which is kind of how some of this, idea, I guess, for partnership may have come about. Before the hospital was in the situation they were in, we were discussing bringing behavioral health services. Actually, right before Hurricane Laura hit, we had partnered with the behavioral health entity MCAL, which is the publicly funded behavioral health services, and we had implemented a new program of telehealth. So we were providing that out of the health unit. We were also working on building other partnerships. We had some ideas to try to bring some dental services down into the region. We were talking about maybe doing a contract to be able to do some drug screening, because that was a need indicated by people in the community, that the industries needed a place to be able to do automated screening. So we were kind of working on expanding our services at the health unit, and then of course the hurricane hit. Now we've been closed for a prolonged amount of time, so now we're kind of taking that direction of let's try to bring the services to where people are. I will say that, as far as responsibilities to provide a space, it's written in law and in legislation that a health unit must be provided. That looks different in every part of the state and really in every parish. In a lot of facilities, the health units are a standalone building, but that's not always the case. We actually relocated the Sulphur Health Unit after Hurricane Laura, and we are co-located with a hospital in Sulphur, and that works, but I will say it takes a very close working collaborative relationship to make that happen. My team is in daily or weekly communication with the team that's operating those services at that community clinic. I think there could be a lot of benefits to co-location, but it's really a two-way street where, both entities have, equal say-so in what happens. And so I think that if you, as a jury, want to really make sure that it works, that's one of the ground rules that has to be set, is that it really has to be a very collaborative relationship in nature.
Yes. Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh, if you wouldn't mind, yet to date, how has the communication with this endeavor agreement and process? Have you been kept up to date with everything, and how's that road going?
Well, I've met with Katie a number of times over the last 3 years to talk about, where we're at in the process of the Elevation Grant, or, we met with an architect and sort of redesigned the space. That was all kind of before this partnership came on. We had that one meeting in September that we kind of talked about what the needs of each entity would be, and then maybe a handful of email communications. But kind of really sparse, and I haven't heard anything in several months since then. It's been kind of hit and miss.
Yes, so basically, from the best of your understanding, you thought all this was basically not moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't know that we were at this point, no.
Yes.
The other thing I would add is, I know we discussed, what the additional cost is, but, when we did meet, and I don't even know if this is still the floor plan that went out for bid, but if it is, it involved a pretty significant change in the structure, in the workflow of the health unit. It would require, an x-ray room be added, in addition to a complete redo of the nurses station. So there were several things in there that really I'm not sure. I haven't seen those numbers. Maybe it would be helpful for us to show those back and forth, but
Yes.
I feel like it would really surprise me if the extra cost was only $21,000.
Yes.
So Lacey, that's the cost of the improvements for the hospital clinic side. Why don't we let the architect, everything you asked for was incorporated, and that's not segregated cost, because that's the responsibility of the police jury. He segregated the costs on the hospital side because we would be responsible for those costs. But
Okay.
the footprint that you received, the floor plan, that is what went to bid. And Mr. Huppower can certainly explain to the jury what those were.
Okay, and yeah, I know the last email I got, there was still some discussion about where the x-ray would be located, and so I don't even know that I received a finalized floor plan that said, yeah, I think, I don't know, we were talking about, and Memorial was saying there had to be certain measurements for the x-ray room to be compliant,
Yeah.
and that's the last that I
So
was.
we had gotten all of those measurements in place with the x-ray room, but I think one of your assistants was in the last 2 Zoom calls
Yeah.
that we talked through,
Mhm.
I guess you were out of town, but we talked through the sink placement and the other locations and the flow for the overall space with the updated nurses station, and all of those things that we talked about is how we did it.
Okay.
None of those changed.
And the costs, so the costs of the extra sinks and stuff on the public health side are not included in that 21,000.
No, those are, as noted, it's the police jury's responsibility to provide your space for the health unit. We segregated the changes, the upgrades that we needed, the lead walls for the x-ray room,
Okay.
and the,
50 in.
and the 50 amp, yeah.
And what about the like structural changes, like by the nurses station, all that's included? So everything on your side that's different from what the health unit is now is included in that number?
That's correct.
Okay.
And
I mean, I
the
didn't
changes that we made were all based on ADA changes that
Mhm.
we had to do. We had to enlarge the bathrooms, and those were covered. We had to actually change the way we egress into the building. So some of those changes are gonna be covered by FEMA.
Okay, I guess, sorry, I haven't seen it, so.
I would much love and respect if, maybe moving forward, we have an open floor communication and keep everybody in the loop on everything. And, just with that being said, Doc, another question, is this the information for us? You know to ask questions, we're not here to make no decisions. I know speaking on the phone with you, and the reason why I'm asking is, I know because I spoke with you, but I want to be transparent with the public and my fellow jurors. You was saying that maybe a mobile unit would benefit the health unit.
Well, a mobile unit, we actually have access to a mobile unit. It's Imperial Calcasieu has a mobile unit, and it's a fully functional. It has a like exam room, compliant with everything. And we've thought about deploying it down in Cameron. When that mobile unit was purchased by MCAL, they intended to be able to use it anywhere really in the 5-parish region, and they've offered it for us to use. But part of the challenge is that with a mobile unit is that our staff can't drive and maintain a mobile unit. There are a lot of costs associated with operationalizing a mobile unit to provide medical care, because you got to have somebody who can drive the 40-foot bus. You got to have places to park it. You still have to transport the rest of the staff because it's not a passenger vehicle. There's a lot of maintenance requirements that are different than a physical building. So we actually drove the mobile unit down to a few places in Cameron looking for a good spot to maybe set up and provide services. But it was hard to even find a parking lot in which a 40-foot bus could turn around without hitting a curb. And we ended up deciding that it was probably easier than trying to operationalize the mobile unit, loading it with supplies, unloading it, is to look for a more permanent space in an existing clinic that we could just visit on a monthly or bi-monthly basis and provide services, which is how we started to work with West Cal to see if we can do that. And why we did that MOU with Head Start is because it was easier to find a physical space with an address to provide those services than the logistics of getting the mobile unit to a place and provide services. The other thing is if you move a mobile unit constantly, it's hard for people to know where you're going to be and when you're going to have to be. So there's a significant media and communications component that comes with that too, like where is the mobile unit going to be today providing services. So, so that's, I think a mobile unit could have a lot of benefits, but it also takes a lot of investment of time and resources to keep it going. Does that make sense?
Yes. And also, what is your take if, because I know speaking with you on the phone, again, I want to be transparent with the public. From my understanding, you and your team are willing to stick it out in the building if we could get you a facility to be elevated, and you kind of brought it to my attention, it would probably be more beneficial to wait to have something elevated versus on the ground.
Well, I mean, that's unfortunately is not my decision. I know that the previous floods and disasters have caused prolonged closures of the health unit. I mean, I think there probably are benefits, but again, whether the building is elevated or not is not my decision. It's your building, and if, you choose to elevate it, great, and if you choose to repair it as it is, I mean, we're happy with that too. We just want to provide services to people, and we appreciate the space that is provided to us from the police jury.
Thank you.
I just have one question. How many days a week would you provide services?
Right now, we have a nurse that is part-time, and Pam may have to help me out here. Pam is our regional administrator. I think she's, the nurse is there 3 days a week. But then we have one clerical person who provides services, or she at least answers the phone, schedules appointments, 5 days a week. And then we have our sanitarian who does, that's Ryan, who does like building inspections, ensures the sanitary code is, kept and permitting. And I think he's a 4-10.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 4 days a week.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the hospital took that into consideration when they talked about the changes to be made to the building, so that they can provide services 24 hours, right? Correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And to Mr. Daigle's point, I'd also like to point out that all conversation that involved the health unit property, the structure, Dr. Kavanaugh, her office was invited and did participate. After that point, it became public record. It was publicly bid. So that's where we are. There's no ongoing discussion until you actually approve the bid package, and then we'll meet more extensively with Lake Charles Memorial and Dr. Kavanaugh's. But
From the discussions at that time,
Yeah.
it was more important to try to get the hospital back functioning quicker than it was for the health plan, the unit, but they were to work together.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the things that drove this.
Yes.
And I'll just also add that I think it's really important to have some access to primary care services in this community. From a public health perspective, not an operations of the health unit perspective, people need access to care. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have in rural communities is access to care. And we certainly see that down here. So I do really appreciate that getting a clinic up and going is a pressing matter for this community. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kavanaugh. And also, Ms. Stephanie, I want to add to the public record. We understand it's public record. We understand people could pull it and see it. But if y'all want to share a building, and in my opinion alone, with the health unit, they should be an ongoing relationship, cooperation, the whole 9 yards, where there won't be a misunderstanding, and say Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh won't have to go and pull public records to know what's taking place.
No, that wasn't my point. My point was, up until the project went to bid, her office was involved. That's all we could do. That's all we could discuss to date, because until you approve the project and the project's finished, that's when we'll be working together. So in that interim, we'll be discussing, scheduling, whatever the case may be. But at every step of the way, which were the Zoom calls between her office and Lake Charles Memorial Hospital, their expert in their structural issues, we did have open conversation. There just hasn't been a need yet. There will be once you approve the bid and the repair starts. So at that point we would, but right now we don't have anything further to discuss.
From what I'm gathering and from what Mr. Barrett's telling me, unless maybe I misheard, when these bids are put out and all the bid package come back, if we don't have just cause, then unfortunately, this project is moving forward.
That's public bid law, yes.
Yes. So with that being said, and it sounds like you're familiar with it, I think we owe it to Dr. Lacey Kavanaugh to let her know there's almost a 95% chance that this is moving forward, is all I'm trying to say.
Sure. Yeah, we invited a conversation before, and we certainly are open to continue conversation and communication.
And then, that's all I guess me, her, and the hospital board would like to see and ask for, because, you know, we all in this together, and we need to be able to work along and coexist with each other, you know.
Well, we are definitely happy to work with y'all and to work directly with Memorial. I have a great relationship with Memorial Hospital. I know Gerald personally. I have Gerald's cell phone number. I talk to him about other projects all the time. So I think it's gonna work out. At the end of the day, I really think that we're gonna be able to make all of this work, and I think it's gonna be a good thing for the community. But yeah, I just wanna reiterate how important communication is going to be to make it work successfully going forward.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, if y'all have anything else for me, I'll go sit back down.
How long is this venture supposed to be for 2 years? The joint venture?
The police jury and the hospital signed, and it's a 2-year, he can, $24 months starting July 1, 2023, which we're behind schedule till June of 2025.
And I'll just say, I found out about that, and I also found out about the co-location on Facebook,
Thank you, Tom.
on a press release with a picture in front of it.
It also states that, Lake Charles Memorial Health Systems and South Cameron Memorial Health Systems announced cooperative endeavor agreement. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was the same one.
All right.
I would like to.
Hey, I tell you what. If you got a question, the problem I got right now is I don't know what the hell you want.
Mhm.
And so if you're gonna hide the ball from me, I gotta kind of go through and answer all these questions and give you information. But you tell me, so for instance,
Mhm.
if your objective is to end this deal right
I have
now.
an objective, it's facts. And
No,
I'm
no.
not hiding the ball, because I asked Miss Julie, and I actually sent her the document.
Well, so
I'm
let's,
just asking a question if that was the one she was referring to.
she's already told you you got more space there than she needs.
I understand that.
All right, so if the hospital's gonna use the unused space, what difference is this conversation make?
The difference of the conversation is that I hope moving forward, they are gonna co-communicate.
And they
But
did
they're
throughout,
not here to make
throughout the
decisions.
planning process, they did, Mark. You didn't hear all that?
I heard some.
All right. So, I'm gonna finish and then, so you just cause, here's where you at. Y'all let out a bid, wasn't you, but the police jury did, unless you got a good reason, you gotta accept the low bid. Not my decision, not me, but your state Supreme Court in New Orleans, Rosenberg Claim Service versus City of New Orleans says unless you got just cause. So what I hear you saying is maybe we shouldn't make the repairs until it's elevated. Is that just cause? I don't know the answer to that question, but it is a good point. But the problem with raising that now is, so let's say you decide we don't want to make the repairs until it's elevated, or until we hear if we got a grant. And if we don't get the grant, then we don't want to spend $1 million to repair it. We're just gonna let it rot or sell it as is. I don't, so if you say at your meeting, we're gonna reject all these bids for that reason, I don't know if that's just cause. It's not an example, it's not in the cases, I just don't know. So that becomes a risk, and the risk is that the low bidder who bid on the project is entitled to the project and he's expecting to make money, so he's gonna make a profit. And if you say we reject the bids for the reasons I've described, he may sue you. I don't know if he will. As a practical matter, he may say, well, I don't want to sue the police jury because I may do business with him later. I don't know the answer to that question, whether he would sue you or not. But if he does sue you, then the question is going to become, did you have just cause in rejecting all the bids? And the problem is going to be is that our just cause was we wanted to elevate it before we repair, which we don't know if it's going to get elevated because we don't know if we're going to get the grant. Well, the police jury knew that 2 months ago when they advertised this. I mean, so that's the problem is, if I know what your question is and what you're trying to get to, I can try to educate you on the pitfalls that we may face, because I don't want you, this police jury, to end up in litigation.
Yes.
So it matters to what you're trying to do, so I can answer the question. I was gonna say, hide involved. If you don't want this to go forward, let me know, and I'll try to find ways to accommodate that, because that's my job, is to try to accomplish your objective. But if I don't know what your objective is, I'm kind of shooting in the dark.
My objective is to get the information, which is why we're here today, to ask questions. We're not here today to push a narrative or where I'm going. Where I'm going with anything is, I want to be transparent with the public. I hope to give all these jurors, because it takes every single one of us to vote for anything to pass, to make sure they have all the knowledge to the best of our capability to make the right decision for the parish, for the hospital, because the hospital district is in the lower. But also for when we use it in talking about the health unit, that's a parish-wide tax. So that's why I think we all agree.
That's why I started with the health unit, trying to give you information, health unit. We've talked about the hospital, somewhat there, so, again, for educational purposes, South Cameron, Lower Cameron Hospital District is just Lower Cameron. That's one of those geographical districts. Those are the only taxpayers that pay that tax. Grand Lake, Hackberry, Klondike, Johnson Bayou do not pay that ad valorem tax. It's only, so if there's a vote, which Mark brought up a good point at a meeting a while back, or in a conversation we had, that ad valorem tax, the 10-year renewal comes up at the end of next year. Okay, 2025. The hospital tax has to come up with renewal. If that tax doesn't pass, then there's no hospital. We don't have to decide today, and ultimately the public's going to decide whether we have a hospital or not, or whether South Cameron gets. Look, I've never used the hospital, never will, don't pay taxes, and indifferent on whether there's a hospital. I don't want to say I don't care, because I think the people of Cameron, I think from my conversations that the people of Lower Cameron do want to keep our room, but ultimately they'll vote on it. Again, I don't make the decision, and indifferent, whatever they decide, I will implement whatever they decide. But for now, we don't have to make that decision, and then ultimately the public will make that decision for all of us, to some degree.
Can I make a statement before we go further? Just want to understand, I hear a lot of stuff about being transparent, and look, I was on the jury. We were as transparent as we thought we could be, and we didn't hide anything as far as I know. We did have a decision to make. How fast did we want to get health care back in Lower Cameron Parish? That's the reason we went for the health clinic. That's the reason the building would be faster to be repaired than to be elevated. We weren't even sure if we had elevation. So we made those decisions, and then in the jury before you guys deliberated, it's similar to this. Maybe not quite this in depth, but similar to this. So I don't have a problem with other people asking questions they don't know. But our meeting is public. It's aired. Their meeting is public. We attended. I don't think we're hiding anything from the people. I mean, if people want to know what's going on, attend the meeting.
Yeah.
You know,
And Mark, I would like for you to clarify the end of our conversation about the proper endeavor, because you just said, Doctor,
Yes.
was it the picture, the Imperial,
Yes,
Memorial?
absolutely.
I want you to clarify that on public record.
Yeah.
Was the end result of that proper endeavor?
I talked to Miss Stephanie on the phone, and I'm gonna elaborate, if Mr. Tom would let me elaborate. I don't wanna.
Your meeting, not mine.
You don't have to elaborate, I just want you to tell them what the
So, okay,
difference
yeah,
about the
so
two
I
posts.
spoke with Miss Stephanie, I asked her, which, you asked me a question, so I'm gonna give you the answer.
I know, but I
because
like
it's
talking
a-
about her,
yeah,
so
but
I'm
it's
like, you and I.
informational. So I talked with Miss Stephanie, and, speaking with Miss Stephanie, I asked her if they had any contract with Memorial Health Services, because I myself saw stuff on Facebook. So I wanted to call and talk to the president of the board. She said at this time, they have no paperwork signed with Memorial for anything.
I said we have no contract, we have a letter of intent.
Yes.
Which was executed, which is recorded,
Yes.
and, you know, it was.
And I sent it to
public
And
knowledge.
in the meantime,
Yeah.
I emailed Miss Julie.
Yeah.
She gave me that, and, cause I was looking, cause I went to public records, I went to Miss Susan Rockeye and asked for, hey, the COA or whatever you wanna call it, I would like to see it between Memorial and, memorial and the hospital board. She looked, couldn't find it. She only found the one between ourselves, the police jury, and the hospital board.
Because
And
you were
then-
asking for a proper endeavor at that time.
That's right.
Okay.
And
I just
then,
want to
when
clarify
I
that.
got with Miss Julie, she sent me a letter of intent, and she has in quotation marks, not a proper endeavor agreement.
It was a letter of
And by
intent.
reading the document, it's nothing binding, so I was just making sure that if we're about to accept the bid, I'll just stop there until the next meeting.
No, but
But
what
I
I
think
would
I
like
answered
to
your
tell
question.
them is, so when he asked about, he said that we had posted or advertised a proper endeavor. So I said, well, could you please send me the post?
Oh, yeah,
And
if
he
you want me
did.
to elaborate with
No,
that?
I was just
Oh,
gonna tell
yeah,
him.
no.
So he sent both of them to me, because I said, well, maybe we're not on the same page, and I'd like to see what you're asking for. So he sent a picture that was published in the Cameron Pilot, that was actually published from our board or somebody here, with the write-up that said a letter of intent or agreement.
It was
On,
agreement.
yeah, an agreement, that's what it was. And on the other post that he sent to me was something that was published or put out by Memorial Hospital, that myself nor any of the board members have any control of their wording, and they had used the words cooperative endeavor, which, okay, it wasn't a cooperative endeavor, it was a letter of intent. But I just wanted you to tell them, because the way you said it just
Oh,
now,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you said, oh, when I called Miss Julie about the proper endeavor on that post, well,
Uh-huh.
I wanted to clarify that that really wasn't our post.
Absolutely.
It was just, they had used the words proper endeavor, that was Memorial Hospital, it was really a letter of
And just to
intent.
be certain,
And
just-
so Mark and I were
just to
fine with,
clarify.
and I clarified it for him, and we're good, but,
She said a post on Facebook, and I read the title of the post.
yes.
I firmly don't believe I said that the hospital board put the post out.
No, no,
Okay.
I'm telling you
I just
that,
wanna make
no.
sure, cause that would be.
No, I'm just telling you that that was something that they had published and just used those words, but it wasn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you.
Want to just clear it?
So my job is to keep you out of litigation. I don't think this elevation issue would justify just cause, because it's not something new. The police jury's known this issue and this, waiting on this grant, so I don't think that's gonna win the day. I'm not even sure that that contractor would sue you, but if they did, they'd be entitled to their loss, the revenues they would have made off this. So that's the consequences of that decision, and just cause and making a decision whether to accept the bid or not. You either have to accept the low bid or reject all bids. And, technically, according to the statute and case law, you don't, unless there's some other reason that I'm not aware of, the just cause of this elevation issue we've talked about, I don't think it's gonna win the day for you if you were sued, because again, it's not something that you just learned today or yesterday or last week. We've been knowing about this elevation grant and the potential for another hurricane. I mean, there's nothing new. When the police jury let the bid out, they knew all that, going forward. So I don't know there's any way to reject all the bids legally, unless there's another reason for just cause that I'm not aware of. So, at the end of the day, you accept this bid, it gets repaired, the health unit, Dr. Kavanaugh, our staff move back in, you provide health services, some level of health services to people of South Cameron through the hospital board, and we move forward. We don't have a cooperative endeavor finalized with Lake Charles Memorial yet. If we were opening the hospital, if we were opening the health clinic next week, if the repair, we would have it done by now. Deadlines have a tendency to make things happen. We really don't have a deadline, so we haven't been in a rush. I think, did we get an email with the draft? So just in the last few days, or a week or so, we've gotten.
It's on the agenda.
We've gotten, I was in court all day, and so I looked at what emails I had to look at to get here today. So we do have a draft of a cooperative endeavor with Lake Charles Memorial, the hospital, to govern. And this agreement's gonna focus just on the health unit idea, that concept. We're not even gonna enter into a contract about the hospital yet, because again, that's 2 years away at best. So we're focusing on my involvement in the board the last year and a half or so, their focus is to get some level of services to the people of Cameron in the form of an urgent care, and that's, everything they've done has been towards that goal, and working with the prior police chief to get to that goal of providing those services. Now, again, in the year and a half or whenever this ad valorem tax for the hospital comes up for renewal, you know, and if it's voted down, then some decisions have to be made with the health union going forward. At that point in time, maybe you all decide that, why don't we try to pass a tax for just the health union? Let's not have a hospital. Those are all what ifs. And what ifs can drive you crazy because we can sit here all night about what ifs. But for now, your decision is, do we accept the low bid? I think according to the law, you have to accept the low bid, get it repaired, and again, the hospital, again, well, we don't know. I was gonna say the hospital will be out and you can do whatever you want with the building, but maybe in the future, if the tax doesn't pass and you decide to pass a lesser tax in this district just for health unit services, then maybe they stay there forever.
Yeah.
Those are just what ifs and possibilities that the public ultimately will decide for us.
Hey, Mr. Donaldson,
Yes.
this agreement is for 24 months, is that right?
Yes, well, and you're already 6 months into it, yeah.
So what's gonna happen at the end of 24 months?
Well, that the board may come back to you and say, hey, it's going great, we need another 6 months, or they may come back to you and say, this has all been a failure, and we're shutting the doors. I don't know. And you decide, and you may say 24 months is up, y'all gotta get out.
So the additional add-on repairs to the health unit is only $11,000.
21, it's 10 and 11.
10 is for expedite.
Yes, 10 is to expedite it, and the hospital's gonna pay for that expedite, if that's what they were, because they've asked it to be expedited.
So
So
is
that's
it
10.
21 for?
And 11 for repairs for improvements, so it's a total of 21.
Yeah, so only 11 for repairs.
Correct, yes. That's, yes. Looked at the architect.
That's correct for the hospitals.
Yes. Yeah. From a legal standpoint, so for instance, again, I don't know if the goal is just for information purposes. I'm trying to, again, representing you as a board, trying to figure out what it is that you might want to accomplish. So one thing that I looked at was a statute on hospital boards. So again, this is take an opportunity for a learning experience for you guys. It's something that we talked about in orientation. Some of you got to it, some of you didn't. But generally speaking, you're the police chief, and all these boards, you create all these boards through ordinance. The legislature says you have the authority to create rec boards, hospitals, whatnot, but if you ultimately decide to create, you could have decided not to have a rec board, and you would have a rec system, but you don't have a board, and it's just a parish-wide rec system that you have an employee that works for you, and you make all the decisions with respect to the rec issue, parish-wide. But historically, this board decided to have multiple rec districts. I just use rec by way of example. I get to all that because I'm thinking, well, let's look at hospital boards. So what does the statute say about hospitals? It says, and this is 46, so it's volume 46:1053 about hospitals. Any hospital service district formed or created under the provisions of this chapter. Again, y'all have historically created the hospital under the provisions of this chapter that the legislature has said this is how you do it. It says shall be governed by a board of commissioners. So your hospital, if you create a hospital district, then you shall have a board that, so in that instance, you can't be as I read this, when it says shall, it says you shall appoint a board. So you cannot, typically if you create something, you can uncreate it, you can destroy it. There are some boards that you can just say, hey, we're doing away with this board. We don't want it anymore. We created it, we can get rid of it. And so I'm thinking, do y'all want to go that far into ending this hospital idea by getting rid of the board? Well, I don't think you could get rid of the board. Again, I don't know, because again, I'm guessing at what's going on here, Mark. So I'm just saying that the statute says shall be governed by a board of commissioners. Well, in the opening paragraph, it says 5. And look, this thing goes on for pages, because every parish and every district has their own little special whatever. And you get to the letter T. You get to 20 or so and it talks about Lower Cameron, again, shall be governed by a board of commissioners, and it's composed of 7. So that was one of those special statutes where Cameron got 7 board members instead of the typical 5. But again, that's the legislature. So again, I'm just giving you, I'm trying to, what is it that you want? And I'm thinking, well, in some instances, you could just eliminate boards, or a board.
And Mr. Tom, I believe we don't want to do anything illegal.
Well, no, that, I didn't know. I
The
didn't,
hospital,
no.
in the health unit.
So that's what I'm,
Will it cost the taxpayers outside of the district any additional money, and is that legal
so, on the health unit, will it cost any more money?
to the taxpayers and taxpayers?
With respect to any hospital expenses, for instance, that $21,000 that's gonna be spent for the improvements, that's paid by only the taxpayers in the district of Lower Cameron Hospital, which is only Cameron, Creole, Branch Union. That's an Intercoastal South, Ship Channel East, that's the hospital district. So, any hospital expense is only paid by whoever pays taxes in that district. Now, the health unit itself, that building, whatever repairs or utilities or whatnot is paid by your ad valorem taxes for the support of the health unit. The whole parish pays for the building itself, yeah.
So,
Does that answer your question? I mean, so yeah, so the health unit is paid by the entire parish. Hospital expenses are paid by only that service district.
so just real quick, the time that the hospital moving forward with everything, they join it in with the health unit, would the hospital be paying a portion of the utilities and maintenance on the building while they're there?
Do we,
Katie's already brought that up, and yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
It's not addressed in the CEA, so we might need to amend that, but
We've already.
I believe that they would be allowable for them.
oh yeah, no, it's one of those things that, to Mr. Nunez's point, is that if the hospital, and that's in theory, anybody can use the medical services, jobs by hand, but only the taxpayers of this special district of South Cameron pay for the hospital. So if the hospital is occupying a police jury building, and you're saying, well, they ought to pay their fair share of the cost to operate that while they're in it, that's a reasonable request, and something that I will go between the two boards to modify or amend to address the utilities. For instance, we just did something with the Consolidated Water Board and the school board. With the Consolidated South Carolina Water Board is, they meet and they're using, some school board property at the maintenance barn. And included in that is the water board said we're gonna pay for some, we'll pay some expenses. So that's not unusual, it just wasn't addressed.
I just want to
But
make
it
sure.
can be.
But it can be, yeah.
You know, if we
Yeah,
want to use any funds from outside the district.
It can be, and it's a good point, it should be addressed.
As far as I know, the people haven't given that permission.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. I got a quick question. If we did expend any monies on that building, would that not come out of the health unit tax?
What do you mean? Are you talking about utilities?
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now, the health unit pays all the utilities, the health unit tax fund, and that's what we're talking about. If your legal counsel would amend the CEA saying that we're gonna split the utilities, cause we're occupying half of the building and the health unit's occupying half the building, then we'll just share utilities.
I think the way, as a practical
They can do
matter,
that.
logistically, the utilities are in the police jury's name, and the hospital would say, we'll pay 50% of the utilities, and reimburse you
We
for
bill them at the
Second, it's our building.
Yeah.
So if we have tenants in our building, we need to make a contract with our tenants.
Correct.
And that's, you have a contract, a CEA just doesn't address those issues, which going forward it should, and it's a good point, and again, that's an easy fix.
And
No problem.
Katie's already brought that up, we've already discussed.
And so, yeah, so I didn't even know, so the thing is happening, your administrator has had a conversation with the board about that issue, and they'll let me know when they decide, and then I'll amend the CEA, you approve it, and everybody will be happy.
I think everybody's good with it, just, want to make sure that the taxpayers outside of the district.
That would be, those type of those ongoing utilities, and use that broadly, water, electricity, all those things would be shared as long as the hospital's occupying your building. Yep. And we can, again, address that very easily.
I just have one more thing I wanted to mention. The facility was offered to us. We didn't solicit it, you know, and we were grateful, but several jurors, that's how the conversation got started. You know, no one's using it. The health unit is currently in this building. You know, is that something you might be interested in? So that's how it came to be. We didn't ask for it or try to encroach on the territory of the health unit or anything like that. Just, you know, finding we were trying to find a temporary location. And it was offered to us.
Defense, the question was, how can we get health services back in Cameron Parish as quick as possible?
And I believe, you know, I don't think anybody in the parish would have an issue with it, as long as it's not costing additional tax dollars without their permission. I mean, the use of the building, as long as the hospital's paying their share, then I don't see an issue outside of it.
Let's see, the one last piece of paper I haven't talked about that I have is, so the hospital ad valorem tax, or the hospital's special district, let's see, 2023, hospital, around 1.5 million was collected in ad valorem taxes. And it fluctuates 1.2, 1.5, kind of depending on the assessed value of properties and what comes on the tax roll, what comes off the tax rolls. And just more information for you guys. But again, that's a tax that expires at the end of next year, it's gonna need to come up.
And on that same paper, if I did my calculations right, it passed 10-1. Around 10-1, it passed.
Oh, you know, I don't have the process for so after every election, we have to record the results of the election, and they're at the courthouse, and we can go get that. I didn't bring that one
It was
with me.
700 to about 80 something.
Yeah, it was a significant passing of, 9 years ago. We're in a different world, different place. Again, the public will ultimately tell us.
And we also asked Lauren to be here in case there were any questions of the information that Mr. Barrett just presented as far as he had created the 10-year projection, which you may not see, but Mr. Laverne is here if you have any questions.
Yeah. I still got a couple more questions I'd like to address, anybody on the board about it, unless Barrett.
So we're gonna move on to the hospital portion of it. I do have one question, it's complicated, you gotta go.
No, I don't go anywhere. I was just trying to make sure I tried to anticipate everything you might ask, and I've got it all out, so.
A lot of the decisions that have been talked about have to do with a debt carried by the hospital. Would you like to address it?
I can't. So, I've been around for 20 years. The hospital's been around longer. So in the mid to late 90s, the hospital had an operator by the guy. So I'm giving you a little bit of history so you know. Joe Swallow was his name. And Joe was accused and prosecuted for fraudulent billing to Medicare and Medicaid. When all the dust cleared, Mr. Swallow went to jail for some period of time, but he left the hospital with a significant debt owed to Medicare, which is the Fed, and Medicaid, which is the state, basically. It forced the hospital into bankruptcy. And so 1999, 2000, the hospital district, the board went through bankruptcy, filed bankruptcy, plan of reorganization, and we didn't discharge all the debts. We were not allowed to discharge these debts to the government. So those were still there. We have carried that debt on our books, according to our CPA auditor guy, to the tune of, and I'll round them off again, $7 million was owed to the Fed's Medicare, and about $800,000 to Medicaid and state. And because of that debt and the way the bankruptcy plan was set up, now I'm no bankruptcy lawyer, but my understanding is that when the hospital would submit, so if the hospital provided services to an individual and Medicaid or Medicare was gonna send the bill to them and get reimbursed or get paid, then the government, that government entity had the right to withhold, I think, up to 50% of the revenues. So the hospital only get 50% back of the services. They couldn't operate that way. They were losing, that was too much money. So the prior administration boards, they came up with a plan with some smart lawyers to figure out how do we continue to operate a hospital but not pay these debts to Medicare and Medicaid. So we have, the board has special counsel, so you are allowed to hire special counsel who specialize, and the Gotcha Sand law firm out of Lafayette is the board's special counsel for dealing with Medicare, Medicaid, licensing, administrative issues with the Department of Health. I mean, there's a lot to it. And I've had to start learning, so I have some working knowledge. But basically, the hospital could not operate the hospital themselves with this debt. And they couldn't bill under the hospital's provider numbers or their tax ID numbers because they'd be penalized by the government withholding money and not coming back to our operators, really. So it was set up, the hospital didn't, they called it a lease. It was leased. So the hospital, this is going back 20 years, the hospital would lease the facilities to someone, an operator. The last 10 years or so has been Stonebridge. And so Stonebridge would operate. And Stonebridge would do all the billing, they'd collect. Basically, the board would just turn over the tax dollars to the operator. And the board had really no or little control over what was happening there. It was the operator, in that case, Stonebridge recently. Stonebridge decides they don't want to be here anymore, they leave. Under the terms of the contract, they exited. And so now we're in a position that I'm getting involved, and so I start learning about what I just told you, because I didn't know all those details. So and at the same time, this past spring, Mr. Russo, who's Secretary of the Department of Health under then Governor Edwards, was calling us asking how can they help get our hospital, because they were concerned about medical services in South Cameron. What can we do, the state governor, to help you? So I said, well, here's one thing you can do. We owe you about $800,000. Why don't y'all discharge or relieve us of that debt so we can maybe better operate and manage? Well, we go through a series of communications and emails, and he puts me in touch with, well, we get an email back saying you don't owe it. So I got an email. We don't owe the state $800,000. Well, I said, and at the same time, I was also engaging, trying to get to the federal side of things, and giving you a lot of information. We're trying to discover, well, we owe $7 million to the feds. Let's get the feds to relieve us of that debt. We've been through a lot. Help us recover. Federal government can relieve us of that $7 million debt. Well, from dealing with the state, I learned first not to ask what you can do to help us. First question is, do we owe you the money? So, no, do we owe you the money? So, Tyron Picard, who's a lobbyist and works for the police jury, is the client of theirs, so I engaged Tyron. I said, Tyron, I need somebody in D.C. that can help me figure out so he puts us in touch with Senator Cassidy's office. So if you ever see Senator Cassidy, his office was a great help to accomplishing this objective. I got an email a month ago, a lot of language in it and a lot of acronyms about CMS and all this stuff, but ultimately, you don't owe any money. So through just asking questions and trying to get relief, we've learned that we don't. Now, some days later, Senator Cassidy's office wrote me back and said, well, wait a minute, there's a $350,000 bill. And so I've turned that over to our special counsel and say, hey guys, look, I don't think this is our $350,000 obligation, because they inverted some numbers on the tax ID number. I don't think it's really our tax ID, it's somebody else's. Or I think it's a Stonebridge, and it may not be, I'm just speculating, so Stonebridge here, just don't get excited. It may be a Stonebridge obligation of more recency, while they were operating, and I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's from the bankruptcy. So the point being is, because that was great, because Sonny's been around a while, and it's great news, and I shared it with Sonny sometime back, and I want to share it with you in the public, is we don't have that debt, a total of $8 million hanging over the hospital board's head anymore. So it really opens up. So what I understand, what that means going forward, is Lake Charles Memorial. So now the hospital board can get a license, provider number, whatever the right terminology is. So again, Facebook world, don't beat me up for the terminology. But the billing can be done through the hospital's numbers, so to speak, whatever, tax ID, provider number, license numbers. And the operator, Lake Charles Memorial, gets better rates because we qualify as a rural, we have indigent, we qualify to get better rates or returns on the services, is my understanding. Which was now Lake Charles Memorial understood that we had a bankruptcy issue and they might have to do the billing themselves, like Stonebridge and the others did historically, but we were able to arrive at this conclusion that, hey, we don't owe the money. For whatever reason, I don't care why, it's not on the books anymore, we're happy, and it's a huge burden off the hospital board not to have to deal with that, and now we can operate normally going forward. So anyway, that's a lot to the story, but I wanted everybody to hear, because it is information. Anyway, the other thing I'll tell you that, so your board has done, that was one thing they instructed me to do, go talk to a bankruptcy lawyer, talk to the PCOR, so that, and again, they tell me what to do, I go do it. The other thing that they've asked me to do, and you may be seeing in press releases, that, and we didn't have, the boards before didn't have this, so this is not a criticism of prior boards, but we do now have an LNG plan in Venture Global, and God willing, we would have Commonwealth and CP2 in the future. Uncle Biden will let us have these permits, but you potentially have 3 LNG plants that they both have agreed. They spend, I don't know what they spend, but probably millions of dollars a year paying third-party vendors for their medical services. They got 24-hour medical people on, my understanding, at the plant. They've committed to the extent that those services can be provided by our hospital through Lake Charles Memorial, they will contract with us. It's a significant source of revenue to help run a clinic or a hospital. And I think Memorial Hospital sees the value in that, and that's why, I mean, we've never, again, 20 years I've been around, we've never had somebody like Lake Charles Memorial come to us, and they're the ones that heard that we were looking. It was over a drink at a bar. I walk in, I see a lady that works, and she introduces me to an executive, we get to talking, and he calls me 3 weeks later saying, hey, we're interested. And that's how it started. But we've historically not had somebody like Memorial interested because the numbers didn't work out. Well, they see the value of these plants. And so they see, I suspect they see the value in providing medical services down here because they may not make a profit, but at least they won't lose a lot of money and they can provide a service to the public. So anyway, that's just something that's happened that I wanted to let y'all know that there's a lot of promise and potential there, that we hope that starts with the clinic. Then after to be the hospital, we can start that project and those services to the clinic.
This is the same provider number from the days of Swallow?
I don't
have any debt.
The provider number.
We have this right now.
Yeah, no, I've got emails. I've got emails from Senator Cassidy and from Mr. Russo, the state. We don't owe any money to any of these entities. The only caveat was that $350,000 that somebody came up with. I've passed that along to our special counsel. He's already emailed me back saying, hey, they inverted some numbers, so it may not even be the right tax item. I mean, it may just be a mistake, but when I got the email from Senator Cassidy, he was just forwarding me something from a federal agency. And the agency had put down the provider tax ID and other information relative to the hospital, our hospital. And one of the tax ID or the provider number, the last couple of numbers were off. We're like 7-0 and they printed 07. So it just may have been they may have been looking at the wrong entity. It's not really us. But we're investigating that. But the point is, we don't owe 8 million, we don't owe 800,000, we don't owe that to any of these agencies, and it really lifts that burden. So it's significant. Yeah. Anything else? Some of y'all are glassy-eyed.
Mark, you have some more questions, right?
Yes, I
Wait,
do.
But before you start, I wanna say this, cause Tom asked a question, I don't think you got an answer to it. The question was, what are we after, right? Well, I wanna make it very clear to Facebook world, Cameron Parish, to everybody in this room. I think you see a full seat of attendance here, and we are the voice of we the people. We just ran into this office, we just got elected, and this is a huge change, historical change, I believe. The only reason we're asking questions is because we just ran a race and we had a lot of questions, and we will give we the people an answer. So there's nothing, I'm glad the room cooled down, and I hope the room continues to stay cool. There's no hidden agendas here. We want to see unity in the parish. We want to see everybody work together. We want to just make sure we have discussions. And the reason I'm saying this is not the first topic or the last topic that's going to have questions. And some of them might feel abrasive, but I'm telling y'all, as majority, and I think I can speak this, we're not here to be abrasive at all. I think we just want to make sure that the decisions we make, we can't go back on decisions previously. The only thing we got control of is the decisions we make today. And we want to make sure we make the right decisions and ask the right questions. So just wanted to kind of clear the air on there.
And that's a good point, and I did get excited, but I have a tendency to do that. And I've been arguing in court all day trying to.
Well, you're not the first person to get excited in that seat.
No, I'm not. But I litigate for a living, so sometimes I felt like my board was getting picked on. But you're my board as well. So the other thing you brought up, and this is again. So when I'm coming to this meeting, not in a vacuum, I've been asked questions about the hospital board, and one is replacing board members. So that leads me to believe that somebody might want to. So let me address that issue. Some boards are protected, some are not. We had this conversation in orientation. For instance, library board, those board members are protected. You can't just pick them off and replace those board members. You gotta have a reason. Hospital board, you can replace them, but you can only replace them for just cause. There's that term again, just cause. What that means, I don't know. But just cause, and you have to have at least 2/3 vote of the governing authority, which is you. So if there was a board member you wanted to remove from the hospital board, you'd have to have just cause and 2/3 vote of you guys. So when I'm asked those questions, I start thinking, well, what's going on? So I come here not just, so I'm trying to guess what's going on. The other thing is, I had a conversation with Mark about the tax issue, which he made a good point. And he asked about calling, so we call it calling an election. I mean, basically put it on the ballot. And there's a process there. And it takes several months for that process to, you gotta advertise, you gotta meetings, you gotta announce the tax, you gotta go to the bond commission, the Secretary of State. So it takes several months to call an election and get it on the ballot. In fact, at your next meeting, we've got several that we're gonna announce, and you'll start to see that process. So, yeah, 4. So, they're all that needs to be renewed. But the point is that when Mark and I were talking about calling this election, most of these elections at the boards, you call, it's just your procedure, your process that the governing authority called the election. But you don't call all the elections. For instance, water boards decide they call their own elections. They vote, it goes through them. Drainage, they call their own election. Right. Well, the hospital as well. So the hospital calls their own. So the hospital will decide when it goes on the ballot, whether it's this fall. So for instance, Secretary of State sets election dates. So we have a November and December election this fall. And it could go on one of those ballots if the board decided, or it can go on any of the 3 or 4 election dates in 2025. that's the hospital board's decision. And I sent the process verbal from the last vote showing that the hospital board called the election. But again, those are questions that I'm asked outside the public meeting, so it leads me down, where are we going with this? So when I say that, I've been asked all these questions, and again, I provide information, and if you have the authority to remove or cancel a board, I tell you that. And that's why I brought this information again, because I'm not knowing where we're going with all this, because I've been asked these questions, so that's it. So I give you as much information as I can, you make decisions. If you got other questions, call me, I'll give you the answers, but sometimes there's not a good answer.
Yes.
For instance, on just cause. Sometimes just cause is what's reasonable, and reasonable is like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes you just can't answer that question.
So, being you clarified that, yes, I did ask about replacing board members, and it ain't because I got anything wrong with them. I've been addressed. There's 3 board members, and there was a different issue in another part of the parish about board members not being sworn in. So I figured that would foresee a problem if any board member under me wasn't sworn in. I took the time to look and make sure they was sworn in. Matter of fact, I contacted one person on the hospital board, like, hey, however it might have failed or looked, or could you find, but by the documents set forth, you're not sworn in.
And he is now. I have the.
Thank you.
So,
And also, there's another one on the board that she's not sworn in. She's unfortunate, had a tragic incident, and somebody, and I don't know the truth to it, you're the guy that's best set forth. And I don't know if it's any truth because I didn't see the document, but they said the state statute is if you wasn't sworn in within 30 days of the day you're appointed, basically you had to replace them, reappoint them, something like that.
and that, I don't know the answer to that question.
Tom, I can address that.
Yeah.
So on the oath of office, number 3 at the bottom states that if you are not sworn in 30 days from the date of your appointment, your seat does become vacant. We all just learned that.
That's fine. So I advise that first, because I didn't get into this, so we've asked for an ethical opinion on that issue, and we probably won't get it till February at
Yeah, it
best.
takes a little while.
And so because of that, I suggested that don't get sworn in, because I think that, I don't always agree with the ethics board, but it's their board, it's their interpretation. So I just suggested that, so avoid any problems, I suggested that you not get sworn in until we get an ethical opinion. And I didn't, in the 30-day, I learned something
We just found
new.
out. I did too.
And if you'd asked me, hey, is there a time limit? I'd have had to go research and come back with an
I
answer.
kind of wasn't really, at the moment, really worried about.
That's not what you were looking for.
Yes. And in the time since I spoke with you about that, there was a third one, and the people's been asking me, and I don't know if I should be forthcoming, but we're here for that, and I want to make sure to be transparent with everybody.
Well, and I would say this, thank you for doing that research, because usually, historically, I get a phone call and say, hey, Tom, are these people sworn in? And we would go do that for you. But hey, you do it, that's fine. That's just one less project. I mean, but really, truly, that's kind of how.
My thing is, if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna be 110% about it. And
that's
if
good.
somebody's not sworn in, because I don't know nothing about this, we just all jumped into these seats, it's a learning curve. And from what I gather, if you're not sworn in, anything the board does, and if a person's on a board that's not sworn in, from what I understand, it's not legal. If they make a motion or something to that nature, why they're not sworn in.
If the vote, if it's a unanimous vote, then one person, it
Doesn't
doesn't
make
affect. But if it's a one person the other way, it could affect the outcome and potentially cause problems.
And like I said, I'm just here, if I'm gonna be working side by side with any board across anything, I just wanna make sure that I can protect them if anything was to happen, and also, I wanna, like I said, whatever the board decides and what they want, and if it's the best reason, I wanna support them 100%. Doesn't matter if I'm against it, for it, or just don't know anything about it. And with that being said, the third one is, I'm getting a lot of questions, and I don't know if you would rather me wait and ask you over email or private, or if you want me to.
It doesn't, maybe if you give it doesn't matter.
One is, for Miss Sheila, from my understanding, which I don't know the truth to it or the legality to it, is from my understanding, before she was sworn in, she's personally in a lawsuit with Stonebridge. So a lot of people's asking me and want to know if that's a conflict or if it could be done or what.
I'm glad you brought, so on that question, no, it's not a conflict. We have no ongoing interaction with Stonebridge. It wouldn't be a conflict anyway, but again, we don't have any continuing contractual relationship with Stonebridge. They ended that, and by the way, they did sue Ms. Sheila, and we have a hearing on that. They've also sued the hospital.
Yes.
For $1.8 million for payments from August, they allege from August 2021 until they terminated in March of 2023 that the hospital was supposed to be making payments or providing them revenue to operate a hospital that didn't exist.
Yeah.
Now, hey, I'm interested in understanding that argument, but they sued this hospital board for $1.8 million based on some alleged money that was owed during that time period when there wasn't a hospital. So I don't know, but yeah, so they filed several lawsuits.
So that's basically why.
So the answer is no to Ms. Sheila. That's not an issue in my opinion. I know that Ms. Julie had been talking to you, and there was one that we couldn't, that you or the clerk or whatever couldn't find the swearing in, and I think she just said that got taken care of.
Yes, he brought it to me.
Now, that doesn't mean he wasn't sworn in. It doesn't, I mean, I don't know. We just, you can't find it. And then there was, I don't know what the third one was.
Yeah, just another one I swore in,
And probably because of what we talked about, and that was my recommendation, is not.
Do you want me to clarify the swearing, the issue with the swearing in?
if you want to, Sean, I mean, I just wanted to make sure we
Okay.
got our paperwork squared away, you know?
In 2013, I met Ms. Rockow on Thursday when I got back from work. On 2013, when I was first appointed to the board, I was sworn in. When my term was up, I was not aware of this, I was educated on this week. When your term is up, you have to be re-sworn in. I did not know that. And supposedly a letter was sent to me, I never received any documentation saying that my term was up. I didn't know.
Yes.
Now I do know, and, you know, y'all can let people, let y'all point to other boards, you know, when their term's up, you have to be re-sworn in every time. I didn't know, but it's been taken care of, you know.
Absolutely, and I think for a number of people across the board, I don't know if we should be educating them or forthcoming, or if that's just known. I just think it's something that's being overlooked, because I think not only myself, but maybe a few of the other jurors is, you know, seeing the same issue with the swearing in part. And I appreciate you for
Well,
That's a valid point.
Most of your boards are probably not sworn in.
So-
Well, and when we reappoint, I don't think they go back through the swearing in process.
Yes.
You know, do that.
So all we do when you are reappointed, you do get a letter stating you've been reappointed to go to the clerk of court to be sworn in and turn your oath of office into your secretary. We do not monitor if these people are sworn in or not, because we have no way to find out if they took their oath of office. The other thing is, if you're sworn in and you don't mail your oath of office to the Secretary of State, then they don't have a record of it either. And we just we don't monitor that.
Well,
We never have.
We didn't monitor it, but that's part of the new process in January. Those board appointment forms that we created, that we gave to you in your binder, that shows tracking it all the way through the process. That's something that we just created in December, we implemented in January. You're the first set of jury to have it. So we have exactly when you were, we vet the board nominees before they're put on the agenda, make sure they're qualifying a member in their district. Sometimes you just have to own property. You don't have to be a registered voter. Sometimes you have to be a registered voter. Anyways, we do all of that vetting before we ever put it on the agenda. Once it's approved, we have staff members that send the letter, and they're gonna talk to Ms. Susan Rocca and make sure that those oaths are being done. Ms. Susan bills the district after the oath's done. It's like $10. So that's a way for us to stay in constant communication with the clerk of court, monitoring those oaths of office, making sure they're done. And also, just for everyone to know, Ms. Susan is always happy to go to the board meetings and swear people in at their first board meeting. If she can't do it in person, she sends someone from her staff to do it. So we're trying to make sure we're doing some positive improvements on our end to ensure that the people of the community that serve as board members, there's a lot less headache they have to worry about. We're taking the responsibility for it. So we've changed it, we've addressed it. We knew it was an issue. We're doing our best to fix it.
So Katie, so is Sean, I just wanna make sure, because he hand delivered it to me. So has it already been sent to the Secretary of State, or is that my responsibility to send it?
That's something that we're gonna help
Okay.
track, yes.
I just wanted to make
Yes,
sure you're not.
but he was reappointed, when were you weren't reappointed till like December or something?
No, he
It
was-
wasn't January,
No.
He was reappointed 2 years ago.
right, yeah. So that's something, as seats become open, this is how we're filling it. Now, anything prior to January, that's something we're not gonna retroactively check. But anyone starting January moving forward, they're gonna go through the new process. We're gonna grandfather it in and slowly weed everything out. So, but we're gonna do our best to help assist these board members keep track.
I think another important thing is we can't assume that every board has a secretary.
Exactly.
That was the shortfall in my district.
And this is a public service, our community members are doing this, they definitely don't get paid enough to do it. So we're gonna do our best to help them make.
Yeah, and I've had
these
some bring them
streamlined.
here and we just put them in the mail, make a copy and put them in the mail. Mhm.
Because even in my two board seats, one received the paper, one didn't receive the paper. Miss Susan was sitting in front of us expecting that paper in her hand, so
Yeah.
as simple as a phone call was very valuable.
More questions?
Yes, I just got, I think, two more questions. I know we're taking up a lot of time, but I just want to be very thorough with the board, between us, the people, so on and so forth. And one of which, my question would be directed to either Tom or the board, whichever one would answer, because, we always want the fastest option. From my understanding, and I could be wrong, FEMA was already in agreement to pay 100% of a modular building. Is there any truth to that, or?
That was before my time.
But so, for the hospital to operate out of a modular building?
Yes.
Okay, not exactly. Here's what I understand. At some point, the hospital board looked at temporary modular buildings to operate out of. And I think they were going to buy or lease. No, they were gonna lease, they put out a request for proposal to lease these modular buildings. So their proposal did not include a purchase aspect. So FEMA generally wants you, if you're gonna buy it, they want a lease option. If you're gonna lease it, they wanna know the purchase option, so that they can decide what the best feasible option is, lease or purchase. So that's supposed to be included in your bid package, so to speak, or your request for proposal, so that again, FEMA can evaluate the pros and cons of buying or leasing. And so it wasn't, one of them, whether they're buying or leasing, one of the others was not, it wasn't included. The total package wasn't FEMA approved. And those, I think they only had two, it was, I think, a request for proposal, they only got two back. And they were in the $10 to $14 million range to lease these buildings for some temporary period of time. So there were two, in my recollection, there were two problems, and again, the minutes would have to reflect it, but this is my memory. One, it was really expensive for temporary buildings, and FEMA, the project, under the way it was bid, was not FEMA eligible because you didn't include that option, again, whether it's buying, leasing. I think they were wanting to lease the building, and they should have included a purchase option, and that wasn't included, so FEMA couldn't appropriately evaluate whether they're gonna reimburse for it. Because sometimes, regardless of the cost, how ridiculous the cost may be, sometimes FEMA will just say, yeah, we'll pay for the lease of these buildings. I'm like, okay. But in that case, I think that's what happened. One, it was very expensive, and it didn't meet FEMA's guidelines, so we weren't gonna get FEMA reimbursement, so it just kind of died on the line.
Yeah.
More or less. And then that was, I think, before even the tent got blown away. So this was during Stonebridge's
Yes,
tent operations kind of
Before
period.
that.
Before, and so that option kind of fell by the wayside, because of, I think, those two reasons, the cost and the proposals didn't go out under FEMA regs, didn't have that purchase option, so FEMA couldn't evaluate it, or they wouldn't evaluate it to approve it. And by the time that all evolved, the tent blew away, Stonebridge leaves, and that just, that never was pursued, I think, anymore because of the price.
At that time, who was the president on the hospital?
I don't know.
Because if y'all would be all right with it, I'd like, just for that scenario, just to weigh out all our options and why, you know, we already ain't had healthcare services. Because I think Mr. Timmy come and asked before the board for a variance for these buildings, and he was granted it. And I'm just, would like the answer as to why it wasn't executed. You know.
No, he might have a better recollection. That was just, I said, that was my recollection. Is he here?
Yes.
Oh.
Want to come up and,
Come on up, Jim, join the party.
Yeah. I mean, unless you don't want to, it's your right either way. I think I would appreciate it.
I was answering emails.
You understand the question I was asking, and hopefully you can give us some insight, or you?
I was actually gone by then,
Okay.
when the bids were put out and received, so.
So basically, to the best of your knowledge, was FEMA gonna pay for that, or it was up in the air?
I was told they were supposed to.
Okay, so it was.
Well, like I said, I was gone, so I don't know what took place after that.
Yep. Okay.
I do know the variance was given, and we sure approved it. Beyond that point,
Yes.
I
Okay.
don't know.
I certainly appreciate it, Mr. Tim.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was just my recollection of,
Yeah.
the proposal didn't include that purchase option. Heck, you could have probably bought them as much as it would cost to lease. I don't know that, but that's what FEMA wants to evaluate, is can we just buy them instead of leasing? And that purchase component was not included in the bid package, or wasn't asked for, so it didn't qualify for FEMA consideration.
So.
My understanding.
Yeah, and then at the moment, I think the other question would be, and after this one, I'm out of questions. I appreciate it for it. But, with the tax expected to pass, it does pass, so on and so forth, I believe, and maybe the engineer might wanna speak on the building too, I don't wanna cut him shy or anything of that. The plan moving forward, I think the biggest question is to make sure we don't end up with a building that's unusable because we don't have the financing. Basically, is it financially stable, and you know, where are we gonna go from here? Because we want this hospital, when we build it, to be here forever, you know?
So, he probably is offended you call him an engineer, not an architect.
Oh,
But that's,
It's okay, I'm gonna call it worse.
So what the board had asked him to do was to plan ahead. So, again, going back, give you a little history. Typically, if you're gonna have an emergency room, you gotta have a hospital. And in Louisiana, it required a 10-bed minimum. So if you had an ER, you had a hospital with 10 beds. And that's what we had before Hurricane Laura. ER, 10 beds. The federal government, sometime in the near past, not long ago, the federal government's regulations say you can have an ER without a hospital. And again, they call it rural health. I mean, there's some terminology, but basically ER without a hospital. The state has not, and so that's a discussion we have with Mr. Russo,
Bless you.
Department of Health this past spring about going forward. Again, looking for ideas and what's the best course of action that this board could take. And one of the questions is, you know, is the state going to follow the feds in allowing an ER without hospital beds? And he said basically they weren't going to make that decision in the legislature last year. They're going to wait for the governor. The next governor can make that decision. So it's still, so that's one of those up in the airs. We don't know if we have to have hospital beds or not, but in anticipation that maybe we don't. So the plan is to have an ER. So currently it's an ER and 10 beds because that's what the state regs require. That's what the plans look like, my understanding. But design it in such a fashion that the state changes their regulations and say, well, you don't have to have 10 beds, you only have to have 2 or 3 or none, that the design is such that you can repurpose that area that's designed for a hospital. The ER is over here, hospitals are connected, but you can repurpose that part of the building if you don't have to have it for hospital purposes. So that has been considered. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. So
Referring
they
to
did,
the existing building,
if the hospital is built,
we're talking about a new building.
a new building, yeah, this is going for a new building. So the plan is the hospital part of the ER hospital will be built in such a fashion that the state says you don't have to have hospital beds, or you don't need all 10, or whatever the case, the plan is to be able to segregate the ER from what was considered the hospital to repurpose the hospital part for some other purpose. So that was considered, because we don't know what the state's gonna do in their regulations. But it is something that was considered, and it's being planned for the what if. So that what.
Is the design gonna be where if we do have these empty rooms, they'll be available for, say, a dentist, other services that can be provided?
That's correct. You'll have water and med gas and all these things where you have probably the best case scenario in any of these rooms, they could be converted to almost any medical use.
And that,
Yeah, I just want to make a statement.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so what it's called is a rural emergency hospital. And the Department of Health and Hospitals would love for us to be the poster child of the first one in Louisiana, but it does require legislative approval. It requires 2, it's an emergency room plus 2 beds, as opposed to emergency room plus 10 beds, which is the current regulation. So with that in mind, knowing that legislation could change this, we asked Mr. Huffpower to design as such so that the unused beds, those rooms could be repurposed. So we're looking ahead in that regard.
Trying to be proactive to those issues.
And really, before you make the last statement, I've got a couple quick questions. Timeline on actually going out with bid for the hospital, when would that happen?
We're still in the programming phase right now, so we have some decisions to be made.
Best case scenario.
Some, to get it out.
Some?
Yeah, like some.
Okay, and on to the hospital, we have once we have a design, we should have an idea of what it's gonna cost to operate and maintain.
But
Will that fit in our tax?
I don't know if he can answer the operation and
Yeah,
maintenance.
no.
The cost to build it, he'll have an idea.
But that's only legitimate questions that I'm thinking the public have.
Yeah.
Do we have enough money to run it with the tax we have?
That's what we will, so we're in conversation with Memorial Hospital about that. Because they know what it takes to run the ER in the hospital. They have those financials. And we really honestly haven't gotten into those discussions. We've been focusing on just trying to get a medical clinic of sort going. So that's been the focus of our discussions and our objective. The hospital operations and maintenance, annual, ongoing, whatever it costs, I don't know the answer to that. And that's part of renewal of the tax, industries contracting for services that we can provide that will increase revenue. We don't know. But we need to know, but before we build a hospital, yes, we'll hopefully have some idea through Lake Charles Memorial's expertise of running hospitals and ERs. And they've done that with respect to the clinic. They've provided us information, this is what we think it's gonna cost, so forth and so on. So we have some ideas, based on, again, their projections. We don't have a deadline. Although the hospital may be ready to go out for bid this summer, before that happens, we'll have to have that conversation with Memorial Hospital about the projected maintenance and operations, and annual maintenance operations of the hospital. And again, we may not know if it's a 10 or 2 bed. I mean, so those are just, we don't know. Right. But those are decisions and discussions that need to be had, that I expect will be had before decisions are made.
And it will be elevated to code, so that should make a significant difference in the insurance as That's an important factor. Mr. Sonny, if I could go back
Oh,
just a bit to the
Look, Mr. Ron. Good.
What's that?
I'm good, Mr. Ron,
She was asking for permission.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify
Oh, go ahead.
something else on the temporary costs, which, no, there is not on record an obligation of a temporary structure. But knowing those numbers, somewhere between $1 and $1.4 million for a lease, the hospital district pays 10% of that. So at the end of the day, assuming that everything would have been eligible for 90%, which I'm sure Katie can tell you as well, that hardly ever happens, but assuming the best that it would have been eligible, but at the end of the 1.5 years that it takes to build a hospital, that you would be in this temporary setting, the district would have spent $1 to $1.4 million of public tax dollars, and with a lease, have absolutely no return on investment. We would be left with nothing. That's the problem with the lease, as I'm sure you all realize. But I just wanted to point out that they weren't gonna give us 100% cost. If it was $1.4 million, $14 million over the term, we would have paid, the hospital district would have paid $1.4 million and not had anything to show for that. It would have simply been like rent money, just like renting the building, and that was the end of it. So I think that's important, because again, it goes back to that fiduciary duty of public funds.
Chelsea just mentioned something to me again, trying to give the public information. I was not at these meetings, but this is my understanding. So following Hurricane Laura, the then current board wanted to repair the building, because that was the quickest way to get back into service. And again, I've said this number, they made the best decisions with the information that was available to them at the time. And they had an architect, not Mr. Hoffbauer, but a different architect, that was advising them on the repair of the building. And at some point, it was believed that they could repair the building at X dollars cost, and that was, again, based on that information, was the right, probably appropriate, let's go forward and repair the building instead of building a new one. But then the architect came back at a later date and said, wait, it's gonna cost more because there's new electrical and plumbing codes, we have to come into compliance with the electrical and plumbing. That's gonna throw the repair costs to the point where it's not feasible to repair this building. So it got to the point where it evolved. It was an evolution of, let's repair, looks like we can repair, oh crap, we can't repair. And that just took a while to get to that point. And so the building it's not repairable, and it wasn't repairable. Had they known on day one that they were going to have to rewire and replumb the whole thing, they probably would have realized early on that it wasn't feasibly repairable, that 50% threshold. That personally, maybe if you haven't, you'll learn the 50% threshold. If it's more than 50, costs more than 50% of the value to repair, then it's a total loss from FEMA. They got to that point, it just took them a while. So the building can't be repaired. We're in, just like you. So the hospital had their own insurance policy. They weren't under the police jury's insurance policy. They are in litigation with their insurance carrier, just like you are in litigation with insurance carrier. The one strange thing about it, I don't know the answer to this, but it came time, the 2-year anniversary, to file suit for the hospital because they weren't getting their insurance money, just like everybody else. We learned that the policy covering the hospital was in the name of Stonebridge. I don't know why that's the case. In my opinion, it should not have been the case, not Stonebridge's hospital. But that's what happened. So again, I don't know, and it's caused a little bit of problem in the litigation because the insurance company. So because Stonebridge was the policy, they were the named insured on our hospital policy. the attorneys that y'all hired, the hospital hired, sued, they named Stonebridge and the hospital as plaintiffs, because technically we're concerned about the issue. If you don't name the right plaintiff, you might lose your claim. The insurance companies filed one of their many complaints back at us. The hospital isn't the proper plaintiff in this litigation, because they're not the named insured on the policy of a building that we own. I tell you all that because sometimes things happen, you don't know why they happen, but they just happen. But they are in litigation with their insurance. We've offered Stonebridge, so under that policy, Stonebridge was the named insured. They received $1 million off of our policy for the business, what's called business interruptions. They got $1 million for business interruption because they're the named insured. Maybe that's why they were the named insured. I don't know. But they did. They got $1 million off of that policy. And I think Stonebridge has acknowledged that they really don't have a claim under the policy anymore because they don't own the building. It's really the hospital's claim for the loss of the building. And we're trying to, I've suggested to special counsel that, hey, Stonebridge doesn't need to be in this litigation because they got their money. They don't really have a claim. They're just in there because they were the named insured on the policy. And if we don't add them as a plaintiff, then the insurance company might be right and kick us out, we lose our claim. We're trying to excuse them from this litigation, basically is my point. But insurance companies need to agree that there's no prejudice to the hospital board. Let Stonebridge free, cut them loose, cut them free. They really don't have a dog in this fight. I don't know that the insurance companies will agree to that, but anyway, that's just, again, information, because, again, I don't know what the public hears, they have questions about, but that is an unusual situation that a private entity would have a policy on our building, on the hospital building. It's created a little bit of a legal issue, but we should get past it. So, but they are in litigation.
Tom, that the hospital building, the existing building, it was actually built after this health unit was. I'm assuming we're having the same issues with plumbing and electrical.
No, it's because it was hospital codes. It's not just building codes. They have special codes for hospitals, and those codes for hospitals got updated or changed, and it was a hospital. And I don't know, can't speak for that architect and what happened, but at some point he realized that there were updated hospital code, built plumbing and electrical that caused this issue of cost. It's going to cost more.
Would y'all also allow Mr. Huffpower to give you the actual projected cost? He has the repair versus replacement versus elevation, and I think that's been grossly misquoted. So if Mr. Huffpower could address that.
About a month ago, we submitted,
Come up here to the
Yeah,
mic.
go to the
Yeah.
mic. So it's on the-
Please, if you're going to.
Thanks. So the project, we had submitted a spreadsheet last week that we requested to provide for the 50% rule, the infamous 50% rule that everybody's heard about. So what that does is that we have to project what a renovation cost would be versus what a new cost would be on the building as is. So if we were gonna take it, tear it down, build it exactly the same elevation. So those projections for the renovation as is was around 14 million. So that would be putting it all back together, renovating. Our projection for a new building, basically just demoing the existing one and building it back new, is 17 million. So if you think about it, having to deal with all of the existing conditions, trying to put it back is only $3 million less than just scrapping it and putting a new building together. And that doesn't consider the elevation of the building. So FEMA will grant us that money to elevate, which right now we're approximating about 5 or 6 million. So the total cost for the new hospital would be anywhere from 22 to 23 million is what we're projecting right now based on our estimates that we have right now. So that was what we had provided about a month or so ago, and that's been, I think, turned into GO-7 to be able to qualify for that 50% pool.
One thing the board considered, you look at the current hospital building that's there and the ambulance district building that's elevated, elevation matters, especially down south. I mean, not, but, so, these buildings, I mean, if we'd had power, we could have been back to work the next day. I mean, little, but these buildings did well. Elevation down here matters, they're built well. And so, again, all the things that that hospital board had to consider, they thought the public has, private people have to elevate. We should not be asking for exceptions. Let's elevate our buildings so sustainability, it'll be here after the hurricane, hopefully, it won't have a flood issue. And again, they're making the best decisions with the information they have available. Again, we haven't let that out, we're not there yet, but they are planning and making those decisions now and asking Mr. Hochbauer to plan accordingly.
That's also one of the issues we talked about in this health, of repairing on the ground. What kind of damage it'll take going up, if we, pick it up, lift it after.
Yeah, I get, that's that whole just cause conversation. I don't know that it would, knowing, if FEMA said tomorrow, we're not gonna elevate that building, then that might be just cause you say, hey, we're not gonna repair that building. We're just gonna we're not gonna spend $1 million, and whatever, it's all tax dollars, but whether it comes from FEMA or local, because that isn't, we don't know. And a month or 2 or 3 months ago, the jury did not know the answer to that question. They made the calculated decision to go forward, to make the repairs regardless of elevation, but maybe thinking that there was a likelihood that we would get that grant for all the things we've discussed. But if we had that decision tomorrow, you might have to make that call. Because if it's not gonna be elevated, do we wanna spend that money? I don't know. We'd have a discussion.
And if it's not elevated if it's as is, and we remodel the health unit, this is flopping back to the health unit, but if we remodel that, can we even get insurance on it?
Yeah, everything's insured. That just, it's a cost.
We wouldn't be able to repair it if it was more than 50% damage.
Well, yeah, that's the other.
That determination on it, that's how they got it with FEMA.
Yeah, it's not more than 50, but yeah, your buildings are insured. Yeah, elevation doesn't prevent insurance. Unless you built it today below elevation. If you built a building below elevation right now, you'd be violating the permits and the rules and the orders and so on, and then maybe you couldn't get insurance. But that's, in this case, that's why it's built up a little bit. At the time, it was built at elevation.
So basically, it's legal to build like it is, we don't have to get no special permits or anything of that nature.
No, I don't know if its elevation is above the current BF flood. I don't know, but it may not be, because every so often they raise that.
Yeah, no, Tom, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
It is built at an 8-foot elevation requirement. At the time of construction, that was the flood elevation requirement at that time.
So,
The state requires another foot now.
And the slab is at the 8-foot elevation. That is the current
It's
elevation.
considered under the grandfather clause.
Yeah, so it wasn't more than 50% damage, so you can
Right.
compare it at the current where it is. You don't have to elevate. If it was more than 50% damage,
Right,
then
the
you have
well
to
was flooded
yeah.
twice from Rita and Ike, so it should be a good qualification for the grant to be elevated. It's just taken, unfortunately, this long, to get things moving,
But if it had been damaged, if the
if it was
house,
over 50, you can't repair it without meeting the current elevation requirements.
there you go.
Yes.
Yeah. But it wasn't, so you don't have to elevate it, but we hope we get the grant to elevate it, because that would be the prudent thing to do.
and like I said, I just wanna make a statement, and, I know everybody's in a rush, but, I hate that we had to bombard everybody with questions. It's just, we wasn't part of this getting to where it is today. And I'm pretty sure all of us just wanted to get the right information and, where we can make the right decision. And we appreciate y'all coming forward and having a meeting with us.
We appreciate you asking questions.
You wanna speak?
Hey, sorry to do this. Hey, I got a recommendation you're gonna hate this. Like cost benefit analysis, before you get in a legality where you're at with the healthcare, you should do a cost benefit analysis on the hospital for both phases. It identifies if your tax dollars are enough to currently cover insurance, cost of labor, and so on and so forth. And it answers 80% of your questions you've been asking over and over again, and people are like, well, we don't know it at this current time. And through that process, the 2 bedrooms, 10 bedrooms that you may have to build, it will give you recommendations on who you should market to be able to fill those spaces. That's why it's the cost, benefit, and analysis. It gives you all your recommendations for that excess space. If you build it, you don't need it.
I think that's what Sonny was asking about earlier, that we just haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah, but, again, I wanna make a real quick statement. In defense of what the jury did, look, we made mistakes, we're gonna make mistakes. Believe me, we're gonna make more mistakes than we made, we do good. But they did the best they could to get healthcare back as quick as possible. It's important to get healthcare back in Lower Cameron. So everything we do here tonight, I hope that's what we take back, whatever it takes to get healthcare back in Lower Cameron.
Absolutely.
And our initial step is this clinic type healthcare, because we don't have a hospital. But that hospital decision will come in the future, we're just not there yet. That's the steps and stages.
So back to my statement, I want to appreciate everybody coming, and I hope I didn't offend nobody. We got a lot of questions because we wasn't a part of it. The previous jury did a fine job at getting where it's at, but unfortunately, we're tasked with finalizing it. So I feel like, for myself, speaking for myself, I would like to know all the information instead of some. That way, if I'm gonna be part of it, I just wanna be informed to move forward. And, for that, I appreciate all the help and forthcoming. And also, I took time to physically go walk through the whole hospital. And from what I see, y'all making a good call of not rebuilding it because all the walls are iron. They're already rusting out. The concrete's chipped in a bunch of places. So for that, I'm not just sitting on the back burner and coming in here asking y'all to produce the information or answer questions for me. I'm actually going to take time and look, and I'm very concerned because we do need a hospital and stuff moving forward. So for that, I'm grateful, and I thank y'all for coming and participating in this.
Welcome, it's always best to get the correct information.
That's right.
A lot of rumors out there, right?
There are.
Want to do everything legal.
You're doing great, all the questions.
Yes, really.
You're asking the right questions.
Need a motion.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.